Good evening, everyone. It's Azarelius, and today I will be announcing or introducing you to Wind Energy War on High Plains by Millie Weaver of Infowars. It's a documentary by Millie Weaver, the woman from Infowars who had the very interesting videos we watched before. But now it's a documentary we're about to watch. So it's quite long, so I'll make this short, and as well I have to make it short because I really don't have time this week, too much work. But I think this is a very interesting but saddening documentary because we're being told that wind and solar and all of these renewable energies are supposed to be so good, but who would have thought that wind would be so dangerous? Well, the wind isn't the danger here, it's what's catch wind, so to say. But also, I am sometimes bad at introducing myself, and I feel bad when I take a video of Infowars and forget to mention of someone, how to really find him. I think at least I did when it was with David Knight, the bearded man that spoke about vaccines. If you want to follow him, please make sure to search for Real News with David Knight. It's sort of a meme or a mockery to the fake news label Infowars had received by the fake media and people like Hillary Clinton that would say that these people are publicizing fake news while they are actually publicizing real news. Infowars are pretty much like the cat when it comes to news. They always land on their feet. I mean, not always, because sometimes they have made reports and they have been proven to be inaccurate and they would have to end up apologizing, which is something everyone can do, even objective reporters, because you see, if a report comes in that Trump would have raped someone, would you report on it? I mean, let's say it's breaking news and he was arrested. If you wouldn't report this incident, I think you'd be a very dishonest reporter, because you would be withholding something quite big. I mean, if it had been confirmed that he was, for example, arrested, but then you would say allegedly raped, because at this point you don't quite exactly know what's going on, other than he has been arrested for something or been taken into custody by police, could be by some other reason. But whether it was something that happened 20 or 30 years ago, well, that's a whole other thing, right? But you should always make sure to report something that you see, that you think something maybe looks fishy. For example, if the numbers doesn't quite add up, and well, a journalists are supposed to ask the tough questions. And a good, real journalist are supposed to be hated by everyone, if not feared. Because, well, a journalist doesn't really gain friends because they're honest. And honest people questions everybody. And as I've learned, people don't like to get questioned. Even though they are saying that they like when people ask questions, they're open to discussion, but when you do question them, they are sort of getting upset, getting defensive, try to throw wrench back at you, but they never can stand and face the music. And I think that's just about the truth with just about anyone in the world, because it's just human nature. And it's something no one can escape. We don't like to always hear the truth, and especially when it's sort of hurtful. What I've come to realize is sometimes that when you talk to people, perhaps you shouldn't force it down their throats. Perhaps you should just give it like a hint. Because if it's an intelligent person that's hopefully open-minded, that person will think on what you said.
Move here.
Reflect, and maybe later that person will come to a realization that he was wrong. But if you jam it in their face, well,
Head over there.
they will be in denial, they will be defensive, they will just fort that off, point to some scapegoat, or whatever else, having millions of excuses. And if it's public, well, then they lie forever. Just like Hillary Clinton, why she lost the campaign. How many people haven't she blamed other than herself? How many people do you know points fingers at others before they look at themselves? If a racer would crash his car on a race, do you think he would blame himself? Some other driver? His team? Or his vehicle? It can be something worth thinking about. But I do indeed hope that you'll enjoy this video, and I apologize because I had a really busy week, and I'm most likely gonna have busy weeks in the coming weeks. But I'll try to do my best to deliver something satisfying. But in my intellectual curiosity, I can say that this documentary is a very satisfying piece. But in the meanwhile, this is where I get off.
Millie Weaver reporting for Infowars.com. We are here in Kansas City, and we're going to be asking people what their opinion on climate change is, if they believe that it's a real thing. We're also going to find out what they know about green energy, wind turbines, and if they've actually ever lived near a wind farm.
I think it's pretty obvious. So we have a substantial amount of climate change in Kansas City, considering it's like the first day of spring near December. So I think it's incredibly important that we invest in green energy.
I do believe in climate change, and about green energy, I think it needs to be more proactive than what we're doing now.
I believe in climate change, and as far as green energy, solar energy is really the way to go, and it's a lot cleaner.
I know it's changing because, like, in the wintertime, it's a different weather. It's like summertime weather, and then sometimes in the summertime, it's winter weather.
I believe in climate change for sure. I'm very big on green energies. Anything sustainable, I support 100%.
Yeah, I think climate change is something that's probably occurring. I think there's a lot of inconclusive evidence or we get mixed reviews, but ultimately I think we could say we could do better.
I think green energy is great, and I do believe in climate change.
You think it's too warm?
Yeah. For this type of season right here, yeah.
Hey, does Alex Jones, does he believe in aliens? Yes or no?
Do you believe in climate change?
Does Alex Jones believe that the elite is controlled by aliens? Yes or no? Yes
Do you
or no?
believe in climate change?
I'm
not Alex Jones, so I...
That's the news agency you represent. You spread lies to the masses, and then they go and I can't... You should be ashamed of yourself.
Yeah, okay, buddy. I don't even know. You're talking craziness. I'm trying to ask you, I'm going to ask you a legitimate question. Do you believe in climate change?
Absolutely.
Why? What are your reasons for believing in climate change?
Drive the car. Yeah, it's a red light, so this is cool. There's more ice in the Arctic shelf right now in the north than ever. That is happening because it's melting at a rapid rate everywhere else. It's going to change the currents in the ocean, and then we're gonna start to see massive. Yeah, we gotta.
All right.
But yeah, keep doing what you're doing.
Do you believe that coal power and gas power are bad, and do you want people to replace those powers with wind and solar?
Absolutely. If we can provide and create and utilize sustainable energy, then why wouldn't we?
I think as much as we can, we should.
To an extent we can, but we'd have to really expand the solar quite a bit in order to do that, and because right now we do use so much coal and gas and oil.
Yeah, so it can be, we can try and make the world better like how it used to be back in the days, to where, make where the houses and stuff is like solar powered and stuff like that. It'd probably be better for me.
You bet. Absolutely.
Do you know much about wind power?
I don't, actually.
I know the guys that work on the wind farms get paid a lot of money. That's about it, though.
Oh, I think wind power is also great. I know there's a lot of windmills in Kansas and Iowa, and I think that's a great idea as well.
I don't really know too much about that.
I do. I know a lot about wind power. My son is very much involved in green energy because he's a landscape architect, and he's worked on projects promoting wind power, especially in the Greensburg, Kansas area.
I think it's great. I think it's a good idea.
I know it created a lot of jobs when they're first installing them, and a lot of the people who got them on their land also get like a government stipend, I believe.
Did they continue to create jobs?
I would say as soon as the manufacturing's done, there would be 0 jobs.
Have you ever lived near a wind farm before?
I have not.
I've drove through the ones in Kansas, but I've not lived near one.
No, I haven't.
I had one friend that a couple years back.
And what did he say about his experience?
He didn't really tell me too much about it. He just was telling me where he used to be stay at.
I don't know anybody who has lived on or near a green wind farm, but I know my son's involvement with it, and it's very important, I think.
I know several people who have them on their properties so usually they buy out large chunks of land and put in several on a pasture or open sort of high plain area. It doesn't seem to cause too many problems. There's been a couple incidents with like installing them and the cattle that are currently on that land, but other than that, it's negligible, I would say.
Did you ever hear anything about wind farms causing birds to die?
I have not. No.
I thought they had the little sound things on them that kept the birds away, but I could be mistaken.
The only thing I've heard about is that they say that some birds do get killed by the windmills, but other than that, I haven't heard anything negative about it.
Ooh, couldn't say for sure whether I have not heard that. It is very plausible.
I'd like to see some numbers on that. My impression from my reading is that it's very minimal.
What do you know about the wind turbines' effects on bat populations?
On bat population, I don't know anything about it other than I would guess it would be very minimal.
Would it surprise you to know that it's between 600,000 and 900,000 bats a year?
Yeah, it would surprise me to know that.
I have yet to hear it. I think a lot of the places that are getting wind turbines in their area are the rural areas, and people are happier to have cheaper energy out there than not have it.
Do you think that the wind farms generate a lot of energy?
Probably so.
Well, I'm not familiar with the health concerns at this point. I just couldn't speak to that.
It's not surprising to find that many of the people living in the big cities are very much for green energy, and they do believe in climate change. But we also find that these people have very little personal experience up close to these wind turbines, and they've actually never lived near one of these things. So we're going to go drive out to the rural areas and see if we can find some people that live right next to these wind farms and ask them what's their opinion on these wind farms and what are the drawbacks. We are here in Hays, Kansas, where a wind farm called the Buckeye Wind Farm has been erected a couple years ago. I had the opportunity to speak with a young florist working in a flower shop that did say that there has been an unusual increase in funerals in the area surrounding these wind turbines for people that are living by these wind farms. She was very nervous and hesitant to speak to me, and when it came down to it, her manager or boss did not allow her to be interviewed because they were just uncertain about the whole thing. But this just goes to speak to more of this weird phenomenon of health impacts surrounding these wind farms.
Quite the workday for El Paso County Commissioners after a lengthy 15-hour meeting. Commissioners vote to move forward on changes to a controversial wind farm project.
11 News reporter Kristen Halbrecht is live now. Kristen, you talked to County Commissioner Amy Lathan tonight. This is her district, so even with all those strong objections, why did she say yes?
County commissioners say if they said no, they could have been faced with a very expensive lawsuit. I talked with County Commissioner Amy Lathan. It's her district. I asked her why she was one to vote yes when she was originally against it. If NextEra stopped the project, Lathan says they could then turn around and sue the county.
If we just decide that we just don't want you to develop somewhere because we don't like it, that's considered arbitrary and capricious under the law.
And construction is set to start right here next month. NextEra is hoping to have the wind farm fully operational by the end of this year.
Well, new tonight, a marathon hearing about the wind power project near Calhan that El Paso County Commissioners approved a year ago continues right now.
It's a feeling of claustrophobia because you can't get away from it. I get nauseous, so I have to take, I'm taking so much medication, you can't even believe it. I'm not a big baby about stuff, and I'm the first one to get out there and work hard, and to know that my garden is something I enjoy doing, and I'm not gonna be able to do it because I can't enjoy it outside anymore.
We're here out in Calhan, Colorado, amongst the Golden West Wind Farm array. Now, there are a lot of people out here in Calhan. As you can see, these wind turbines were built amongst a heavily residential area in a rural community. I mean, there are homes kind of all throughout here, and these are giant wind turbines. I mean, people don't realize how enormous these wind turbines are. If you actually were to measure the blade diameter, it's actually the length of a football field. A lot of these people did not participate. They didn't get compensated. They were against the wind turbines being put next to their homes for a variety of different reasons. And I've seen a lot of properties out here that look like people have moved and left. We're here right by Liberty Road, and the reason why I chose to do this right by Liberty Road is because our liberties, our property rights as rural community citizens of the United States are under attack by globalist influence wind turbine industrial corporations.
Senior scientist Vladimir Gavro is an electrical engineer. It seems Gavro has constructed an acoustic weapon. It begins when he and his assistant start suffering bouts of dizziness and nausea.
Humans can't hear infrasound, but it still affects us. It disrupts a delicate balance system in our inner ear that makes you feel dizzy, nauseous, and generally it's quite unpleasant.
It takes some time to locate their source. Gavro suspects a faulty ventilator has been generating ultra-low frequency sound, inaudible to the human ear, known as infrasound. French scientist Vladimir Gavro has stumbled across the dangerous effects of super low frequency sound on the human body.
Since the meeting here on Thursday, where the county commissioners heard NextEra defending themselves, claiming that, yes, we now do admit that infrasound is being trespassed onto non-participating residents from these wind turbines, but their claim was that it was not causing any medical harm. Well, the person they had as their medical expert was simply a man with no little more than a philosophy PhD degree. So they had a philosopher up there presenting their medical facts as to why these wind turbines were safe and why infrasound wasn't going to harm residents.
I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV.
Well, you know, I did get a chance to go up there and I spoke my mind. I told them about a scientific study that several of the people out here, the residents, participated in which medical doctors did say that these wind turbines were causing several residents, including myself, health effects.
Please, sir, we've done what you told us.
I'll have to give the matter a little thought. Go away and come back tomorrow. Very resourceful.
Yes, sir. So we'd like you to keep your promise to us.
You ungrateful creatures think yourselves lucky that I'm giving you audience tomorrow instead of 20 years from now. Oh, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
I don't believe
Now, what's interesting is since this meeting happened since Thursday, these wind turbines have been off. Now, it really makes me wonder, are they going to be off permanently? Have the county officials decided that they are actually having an enormous liability on their hands? So we were just standing out here reporting when this man came out and stopped by to ask us why the wind turbines weren't turning, and he himself is a resident out here amongst the wind turbine array. So have you been affected at all by these wind turbines?
My family has. They have made my wife very sick. She has trouble walking now. Her joints ache. We sold off our cattle. They weren't doing well. Our chickens stopped laying eggs. And we're planning on moving. We're being forced out.
Is there anything else you want to say about, you know, the wind turbines and things like that?
We feel really bad that the county didn't look after the people that were here. Apparently they got bought off politically or something. All the objections that were brought forth, they just brushed aside. And we always felt there was a ulterior motive why they were here. But, you know, without a lot of money to dig into it and legal aid, there's no way you'll ever find out the truth. The way they wrote the contract, they can turn around and walk away, and the county's stuck with trying to get rid of these things. We've also heard that the liquids that they use in these things pollute the ground. And there's no way of getting rid of that, too. The ground's contaminated for years afterwards. I don't think you're going to have a chance with Xterra. I think they're going to take their money and run if they haven't already. And then the county's stuck with the cleanup. And, you know, they won't be able to do anything either.
These things are already falling apart. There's patchwork done all along the sides of these things, and there's been numerous blades and repairs that have been having to be done on these wind turbines.
I appreciate InfoWars coming out and looking into this, and hopefully they'll make the public more aware of what's going on, and maybe there'll be some resolution, and I hope it stops some of these wind farms from spreading to other parts of other communities that'll affect the health of other people. Thank you very much.
By the fact that this man just drove by and stopped. I've never met him before, and he came out saying that his wife and himself are experiencing health problems because of these wind turbines. So they don't even attempt to complain, they don't even attempt to try, because they feel like the county doesn't represent them and the county just completely disregards their opinion whatsoever and is just fully doing whatever this big billion-dollar wind farm corporation tells them to do. Now, we did get a tip from this gentleman that the NextEra wind turbine office area where they have their controls and whatnot seems to be closed down. So we're gonna go drive by to see if that's the case, because I mean the turbines are not operating, so it seems as though they have shut them down for now. Now, we do not know if they are in fact closed or not, but I don't see anybody here, and they definitely are locked up. Their gate is locked, and the turbines are not running. They are off. And according to residents, they have been off for a couple days now, and people are starting to wonder and speculate as to why they're off and if it has anything to do with the recent meeting with the county officials. I'm here with Joe Cobb and his son. They are both residents out here in Callahan, Colorado. So, Joe, how's it been living amongst the wind turbines?
Torturous. Absolutely torturous. It's just something that's just every day. It's just berated and beat on every day. You can't get away from it. And now that they're down, we don't know what to think.
You guys do have livestock and animals. How have your animals been? I mean, I know you said that a lot of them have actually passed and you've had a lot of problems. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we've lost 16 animals in the past 18 months since they turned these things on. We've had 2 blind ducks. We got another one that's going blind. We've had deformities in baby goats, and we've had even a baby horse that was aborted at full term, and we don't have any explanation why. But we've been doing it for 30 years, and we've never had these problems.
And what about you? What type of symptoms and health problems do you experience from the wind turbines?
It's been exhaustion is a good way to describe it. It is, you can sleep 8 hours every night. You wake up, you're just tired. You stay tired. It doesn't go away. And mental clarity is a good way to describe it. It's like you're in a fog.
I know that your mom has had health problems from it too. What does she typically experience?
It's been tiredness, headaches. It's been
mental exhaustion.
Yeah.
Just straight up mental exhaustion. And she's been fighting this every day. She's only been away from it for 2 weeks since they came on. And you can just see it in her. I mean, the get up and go has got up and left. And she just fights it every day to take care of the animals and feed them and keep them going while she's watching them suffer and die as well. So it's really been hard on her.
Do you think that the county commissioners are actually going to do something to turn these things off?
Well, that's the only hopes that we have at this point. We've done our best to go before them and present our case. And we're hoping that at least they can give us a little bit of due credit. They talk about being respectful of them. They need to be respectful of us as well.
Do you think that's a little bit of a victory that NextEra had to admit that, even though they tried to then say that the infrasound wasn't going to cause health problems?
Well, it's absolute victory because all the times before I've talked to NextEra, and I've talked to David Gill personally on the phone, and he told me infrasound exists, but turbines don't produce it. And so I was fully prepared at the meeting to give them proof that infrasound does exist, but they came along prior to that and admitted to it. So now we just got to get the health aspect of it out there, and all we can do is send out the information to the Board of County Commissioners and hope for the best.
The wind turbine company only did admit that the wind turbines did create infrasound after residents out here, including myself, all kind of chipped in and paid for an acoustical engineer to put equipment out on various properties out here to test for infrasound. And it was once that acoustical engineer found the presence of infrasound and that data was given over to the county, only then did NextEra admit to the infrasound being present on non-participating landowners' properties.
You humbug!
Yes, it's exactly so. I'm a humbug.
Oh, you're a very bad man.
I wanted to talk with Jeff and Sandy and ask them, how have you guys been since these wind turbines turned on? What health problems have you experienced?
For me, it started with the generator alignment tests. For some reason, my heart reacted to 2 of the different tests in which the wind was blowing through the turbines. I ended up going to the cardiologist and discovered that I had 2 different problems with my heart. One which was traditionally a turbine-related type medical issue, and one which was called a mitral valve prolapse, which was the painful one. Discovered that these problems were probably brand new because they were in their infancy, so to speak, in the body.
Wow, and what about you, Jeff? What health problems have you experienced?
I guess it started with the migraine headaches, the dizziness. I've also had lots of stomach problems, and we had some issues with a dog dying that we autopsied, and kind of freaked me out because all of his organs had swollen and his liver had failed. So I had my doctor, check me out and found out that my liver had expanded too. So at that point, we decided we had to get out of here.
Have you heard of any heart attacks or any deaths or fatalities due to the wind farm, and as well as humans, but also animals?
After the generator alignments, they had the line activation, 3 days of line activation. That culminates in the final transfer of 250 megawatts of power down the line to make sure it can handle the volume it's quoted to. And on that night, we had a cardiac death, a cardiac event leading to death. We had 2 farmers end up in the hospital with cardiac events, and I myself did not go to the hospital, but I thought I was going to die of a heart attack. We have seen a lot of ocular problems out here. We've had a woman and horses go blind. Our cows show night blindness now, so do our donkeys. In fact, for our miniature donkey, it's extreme, the night blindness. And then when the turbines are blowing, they will go into day blindness, where I have to guide them to the food. You cannot imagine how bizarre that is. And up in the region, other people are experiencing that. We experience that ocular pressure. Then seizures. NextEra likes to claim that these don't produce seizures. They absolutely do, and it's not just the flicker. The infrasound also induces seizures. We have proof of it. We have too many seizures out here. It's become an epidemic of seizures. I'm experiencing it. And then another problem is we've actually had people who, it's not just nausea. We had a woman who had to have stomach surgery, and they could not figure out why that happened. And when I mentioned that the turbines caused nausea, he said, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to tell the doctor," because the doctor had no idea, we had no idea how this happened.
What did you do, Sandy, before you decided to come out and live the rural life?
I studied engineering, electrical engineering, specifically communications, and I have a physics degree also, so I worked for a mapping company after college, and then I worked for 2 different power companies, and then we decided to be closer to our families, so we moved to Colorado, and I went to work for the DOD. What about you, Jeff?
Yeah, I went to school for IT, so I was a programmer, systems analyst type of person, and until we got the farm out here and started doing the rural life.
Well, what would you say to some of the people out there that may be skeptical about wind turbines causing problems and infrasound being a problem, given that, you guys both have some pretty good college education under your belt and you have a lot of experience in engineering? What would you say?
I would say that anybody who thinks wind turbines aren't a problem, come out and live for 3 months in a turbine-infested house. I would actually recommend a year of it for the true skeptics that have influence, because what's going to happen is that you're going to know exactly what these rural people are going through, and you'll have a upfront understanding of the bizarre nature of the wind turbine environment and the extreme degradation that happens in the body.
Since the turbines have turned on, we've had 5 dogs die unexpectedly, and we've had a steer and a baby bull die that, there's not really a good explanation about why that happened. We don't have a lot of animals. It was like, so basically at least 50% of our animals have died in the last year and a half. I guess I was a skeptic to begin with too. It was like I thought they'd be a little noisy and we'd get used to it, but there's a lot of propaganda out there that's all pro wind farm. It's like they think that we're going to save the planet with these things, and there's really not a whole lot good about them.
These turbines are off. They've been off for 3 days. Nobody's missing them. Last night we were able to sleep in the house because the turbines are off, and that's the first time in something like a year and a quarter. It was wonderful.
Yes.
So if they end up keeping these wind turbines off, are you guys planning on staying?
Oh, yes.
We don't want to leave because we love the place, but I don't see really a choice except, maybe they'll stay off. I mean, it was such a blessing to be off right now.
So Rosie, how do you feel about the wind turbines being off? You happy? Happy cow. Yeah, she's a happy girl. Look at her. She's happy. On Tuesday, President Trump signed an executive order unwinding Obama's climate change policies, which has climate change believers in a panic. Now, this comes after President Trump has already directed the EPA to start withdrawing and unwinding Obama's Clean Power Plan Act, which pretty much was trying to dismantle coal plants and replace them with solar and wind. So we're going to be joined here by Larry Mott, a former General Electric power plant engineer, to talk about these wind farms and their efficiency. Thank you so much for joining us, Larry. So Larry, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, and please explain to us how these wind farms aren't as efficient as these wind developers would want us to believe?
Okay, first a little just briefly about my background. I started out as a nuclear power systems engineer with General Electric Company and was with them for 5 years. And then after that, started my own firm as a consultant in mechanical systems, mechanics, structures, and also power systems, including solar and a little bit of wind, but more on the residential level as opposed to the industrial level. And for the last 30-some years, I've been essentially self-employed as a consulting engineer in Colorado, but also with international practice extending to Europe, and been to Japan and a number of other locations as well for clients.
So can you explain to us from a technical perspective how these wind farms aren't really that efficient? Because I know you were saying something about that.
The primary problem with wind farms in general, the industrial turbines, and for that matter, even the smaller turbines, is that the source of the energy that's contained in the wind is essentially a very diffused source. It's very widespread, very low energy per volume. So in order to actually take any energy out of the wind, you have to have a very, very large system. That's why these wind farms are so big. And there's a limit to the efficiency that can be gained from the farms. Essentially, there's since you have physics formula, a mathematical formula that indicates that there's a minimum or essentially a maximum amount of energy that can be derived from the wind, from these airfoils, which is essentially, these blades are actually airfoils, they're not really a windmill in that sense. So there's a number of factors that feed into this formula. One of them, for example, is the air density in the mountains. So these machines are approximately 23% less efficient at the elevation of Colorado, or Callahan, where this wind farm is, than they would be at sea level. When you take into consideration all of the inefficiencies, the nameplate rating, which is what is primarily used as propaganda. In this case, the wind farm is supposedly a 250 megawatt farm. The actual rating of these machines is about 0.7 megawatts. So the rating on the field is not 250 megawatts, it's actually closer to 100 megawatts. Then the biggest factor is what we refer to as the non-dispatchable nature of wind energy, which means that the wind is intermittent and Mother Nature controls it, not the engineers in a dispatch center. So you cannot actually ask the wind farm to produce more energy if you need it. So when you take into consideration that plus what's known as capacity factor, which is the amount of time that the wind actually blows at a rate that you can derive energy from, all these inefficiencies applied to the 250 megawatt nameplate rating brings it to under 100 megawatts.
Wow. So if these wind turbines are so ineffective, then why do they exist? I mean, what do they survive on? And can you go into that for us?
Real briefly, the only reason that the wind farms exist is that they are actually harvesting tax money, not wind energy. There's a power production tax credit that provides 2.3 cents per kilowatt hour, $23 per megawatt hour of taxpayer money to the people who actually start the wind farms and operate them. So they actually make more money on the tax transfer from working Americans to the owners of the wind farm than they do from the wind energy themselves. And to put it very briefly, Millie, if it was not for the power production tax credit, there would be no wind farms in America.
Wow. And I know you spoke with me a little bit about some corruption that you experienced out when you were out there trying to fight the El Paso County wind farm. Can you tell us about that?
That's a pretty long story, but I'll try to be as brief as I can. About year 2006 or so, an organization called Clipper was promoting the wind farm in that particular area. They were unable to put it together primarily because the zoning would not have allowed it. So an organization came forward called Mott. It was run by a fellow named Matt Cumberworth and David Hazel. And what they did is they actually packaged it up, and they were able to arrange for a zoning overlay that essentially allowed the county to put in these enormous towers, which would have normally violated the zoning laws. So that's when I first noticed, and we went after it based on technical matters. But that turned out to not be very effective because the technical aspects which we just discussed, for example, the lack of efficiency, is not really a major consideration. The major consideration is the flow of tax money. So NextEra was instrumental in the initial hearing, though they were not the owners yet. The owner was Cumberworth and his organization. They were sitting in the room, however, and the idea was that they would run a power line through into Falcon underground so that the Falcon people would not be opposed to the wind farm. That's what the first hearing involved, and they essentially were able to limit all the opposition to just folks that were living in the wind farm. All the Falcon opposition essentially dropped out. But they were not able to afford to do the buried power line, Millie, so they had to get a change. So NextEra essentially assumed that there would be a change to an elevated power line, and in order to get that pushed through, they essentially made a payment to the county of $1.63 million prior to the hearing in 2015. They arranged for an elevated power line through a circuitous route through Falcon, not down Highway 24 and not underground. They weren't able to afford an underground power line, and they did not want to run it down 24 past all the residents of Falcon. So that hearing happened in 2015, and that one was essentially a unanimous decision in favor of NextEra, with threats from NextEra to sue the county if that hearing had gone against them. The Planning Commission hearing prior to the Board of County Commissioners hearing actually denied the change in the design and would have therefore essentially killed the project.
So why did the county commissioners approve the project if the planning department denied it?
The planning department had its hearing about a month prior to the county commissioners, Millie, and The evidence that was presented at the Planning Commission was actually quite devastating to NextEra. They actually were caught trying to manipulate and threaten members of the public. The Planning Commission members actually took that into consideration, and they denied it 6-3. Unfortunately, the Planning Commission does not have a power that's binding, let's say. All they can do is recommend. So they recommended that the project be denied, the change in the project be denied. And I should point out that had the change been denied, in other words, the change to an elevated power line through a circuitous route through Falcon, had that been changed, the project would have been killed.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Larry. But we are running out of time. This just goes to show how, there's a lot of money in these government subsidies that funnels into these wind farms, and they have a lot of power, and they can use that money to influence. I'm here with Mr. Lord Christopher Monckton. What is your opinion on the wind turbines, and what do you know about some of the fraud that they are, perpetuating with these wind turbines and the tax subsidies?
Right. First of all, wind turbines are an extremely expensive way of generating electricity. Per megawatt hour generated, they are 5 times as expensive as coal-fired power, if you include the subsidies that are paid to keep them going. But that's before you take into any account of the environmental cost of these turbines. Several major bird species are being wiped out and made extinct worldwide by these windmills, some of which are 600 feet high and have blades 300 feet across. I mean, very, very seriously big. They are a fraud. They generate intermittent electricity, costly electricity, and environmentally damaging electricity. And because of the prodigious amounts of concrete that has to be made by burning of lime to make the base of these turbines to stop them falling over in a high wind, they actually emit more CO2 to the atmosphere than they will ever save with the electricity they generate in their entire lifetime, which turns out to be, on average, not more than about 10 years. So they are a disaster that has found somewhere to happen because crony capitalists have cozied up to governments. There is no scientific base for them because we now know there's no problem with CO2. And even if there was a problem with CO2, by having windmills, you're actually adding to that problem because the net CO2 emissions from windmills, because of the construction, the delivery, the transmission lines, and above all the making of concrete for the bases, exceeds any CO2 that would be saved by their operation. So in every way, windmills are an entirely useless solution. They break down and require maintenance at a much higher rate than had at first been suspected, though I could have, when I did in fact, warn them that that would be the case. And so they are a thoroughly bad idea and ought, in my view, to be banned. They kill in particular the large game birds, which swoop from a great height on their prey that they see below. And of course, often they see other birds dead at the foot of these turbines. And what the operators of these turbines now do is they have people at each major turbine site who are on site every day going around picking up the dead birds and taking them away in the hope that nobody will see what's going on. But in Scotland recently, we had a very rare bird that came over and flew across the Highlands of Scotland, and all the twitchers, the bird watchers, came out with their binoculars and they followed it wherever it went, and they were radioing through to each other, and they followed it across Scotland until eventually it flew into a 600-foot turbine. It was batted out of the sky because it couldn't work out how fast the tips of these blades were traveling, and it was killed. Wow. And it was a very rare bird, and this is happening more and more. Bats are also killed by the turbines, and they're killed by the million, because if they go anywhere near them, the very delicate lung structures of the bat will simply implode, and the bat will die instantly, even without actually striking the turbine. So it's economically disastrous. Golden eagles are being wiped out worldwide. The osprey, which is just clinging on by its toenails in Scotland. And Scotland now in 60 or 70% of the Scottish landmass, you can see these damn things. The Scottish landscape, which was one of the most beautiful, wild, unspoiled landscapes in the whole of the world, has been destroyed by this monstrous industrialization with these 600-foot high mountains.
That's right. And Donald Trump had a golf course in Scotland that was even impacted by wind turbines, and he has been vocal about, you know, his opinion on wind turbines and that they are a big waste, just as what you were saying as far as the tax subsidies.
He came and took a large area of sand dunes on the east coast of Scotland and turned it into a magnificent golf resort. And then along came the developers and said, we want to put wind farms in. And this, of course, destroys the fragile environment, and of course it destroys the bird life, and above all, for a golf course, you want a nice view. And if you're looking at these rusting turbines, half of which aren't even working most of the time, it's really a tragedy. And he was quite right to be very angry that, having put a lot of money into this resort, he then finds it spoilt by these crazed environmentalists in the so-called Scottish, so-called national, so-called party, who are really a sort of new version of the Communist Party, who have gone round putting these windmills all over Scotland because they hate the landowners who own Scotland, and they want to do exactly the kind of damage to them that they've done to Trump.
We have the best weapons against death out there at the lowest prices, waiting for you to lovingly plant them and lovingly grow them and share them with others. So please join us at InfoWarsShop.com at the InfoWars Seed Center.
Today we call it bone broth, and for thousands of years our ancestors enjoyed its benefits before it became lost to our modern diets of processed junk. We are now introducing Caveman by InfoWarsLife.com, the ultimate in true paleo nutrition with bone broth, turmeric root, chaga mushroom, and 7 total primal superfoods in a single great tasting formula. Caveman. It's those people living in the wilds having to actually build civilization that are our superior ancestors, and we need to do everything we can to recapture that. Everyone knew that you used all the parts of the animal. You used the meat for sustenance, the fat for cooking, but you used the bones for strength. From the outside structure full of minerals and key cofactors to the marrow that produces the blood for the body, this is the engine of the life essence. I'm a long way from the caveman my ancestors were, but I'm sure as hell trying to get back to that essence that made us what we were, and this is a big part of it. I know you're going to want to check out Caveman Ultimate Paleo Formula for yourself at InfoWarsLife.com today.